hit, go get the money. So I go get it. Hate means I do something right. So I'ma let him. Yeah, I'ma let him. Yeah, I'ma let him. I hit the nail on the head. Yeah, I'ma let him. All I hit, go get the money. So I go get it. Hate means I do something right. So I'ma let him. Yeah, I'ma let him. Yeah, I'ma let him. I hit the nail on the head. Yeah, I'ma let him. Early bird, go get the
So we're working on the Land Rover. One of the first things you're going to want to do with this vehicle is you're going to take off this lower skid plate. It's going to be held on by two 13mm bolts and two 10mm bolts. That's going to be directly underneath the vehicle. That's just a splash plate. But getting up under the hood here, you're going to want to take your engine cover up and off. We're going to look at these here. Intake hose clamps. We got one here, and we have one over here, and down in the middle at the throttle body. With my very poor lighting here, let me break out a flashlight. We have one there. Those are all 7mm. I'll pop those real quick so we can take a look. Now with those loose, I'll hold the intake boot, pop one side, pop the other side. The best way that I found to do this is kind of just pull up on the back here, up on the top, get that loose. Now, don't go ripping this off just yet, because these have this, which this right here is a little PCB line. So we do need to pop that PCB line off. And as you can see here, we have a little, what do I get? We have a little two clips on the side. So squeeze together the two clips, which is awkward at best. Pop those two clips. Make sure that hose is good and disconnected. Now, the goal here, as usual, is to get this off without breaking it. So you kind of want to tip it back down, not up so much, but down in the rear, up in the front. And this kind of all just pops up out of there. Moving on here. So, now we're getting a little better look. Let me grab a little more light. Shout out to Cornwell for making these awesome under hood lights. Okay, I have a little more light here. Today's job, we're going to be doing this thermostat and the lower hose, but I'll show you a couple other things over here. So, got this little reservoir overflow hose here, get that out of the way. We have this sweet little tree clip, wired clip here, so head over to our toolbox, grab our Cornwell trim removal, and we can pop that guy up out of the way there. Get that up out of the way, pull this upper shroud out of the way. One more down here. Set that up there out of our way for now. This gives us a little better viewing point to the thermostat. So earlier we pulled off the lower shroud. This can be so we have a, I don't know if you can actually see here. Switch this over to manual focus so I can show you guys. We can see daylight underneath. That is the floor of the shop. So we can use that now, so when we're disconnecting these hoses and we're making a mess, it's all going down and out the vehicle. So go all the way down, put our skid plate under there, and not have an issue anymore. So with that being said, the next big thing on our agenda here is to drain the cooling system. I kind of do the unorthodox way of just pulling the lower radiator hose, and it makes a little bit of a mess, but it gets it done fast. So that's what we're gonna do. I realized for I don't even know how long that I had the image stabilization off, but now it's a lot smoother. So I thought I'd take a quick moment to talk about the parts we're using today here. So in this case, we ended up getting an OEM part. This is straight from Land Rover. So this lower radiator hose is more of a hose assembly. When you order this straight from Land Rover, it does come with a brand new spring clamp on the radiator side, and they are kind of glued onto the bottom of the hose there so it doesn't fall off. That's a nice touch. It comes with a new, I think they call that a thermostat temp sensor. I could be mistaken on that, but it does come with a new temperature sensor probe in the hose, so if yours is leaking or it's you have a code for it, and then getting the hose assembly is a good bet. I say hose assembly because it does have the temperature sensor probe as well as this outlet. And if you don't want to order straight from Land Rover, or if you don't have a Land Rover near you, what you can do is you can order this from a company called Atlantic British by going to their website, roverparts.com. And if you look down there, we have man, this, again, bear with me here, try to be a one-man crew. Well, so if you look down below here, one thing that's going to be relatively difficult for me to show on camera, but I'll do my best. There's actually another hose coming off of that hose. Okay, right in about the center of the frame there. So we have our main hose goes left, and then right about the center of the frame of this picture right now, you can see, I'll circle it in edit, you can see the clamp sticking off a little secondary hose that comes off. Now that hose is not super relevant to this discussion, other than that that's why we have this little Y connector here. So when we're disconnecting this, we're going to disconnect, this is going to sit like so. We're going to disconnect the radiator side, drain the coolant, then we're going to disconnect this Y hose right here. Okay. Disconnect the Y side where my pinky is. I'm going to unplug that temperature sensor, and then we're going to undo this clip. Then we can pull down on the hose and get that up out of the way. And once that's up out of the way, we can talk about the thermostat, which I did not get from Rover Parts or Atlantic British, but rather a local parts house, a green one to be specific. One thing I thought I'd mention here, for those of you following along at home that want to do this job, is when you go to pull this radiator hose, for one, you're either going to want a pair of proper hose clamp pliers, or you're going to want a long set of needle nose. These are some 14-inch, I believe 14-inch blue points. And you're going to be reaching down through this little crevasse here between the fan shroud and this little reservoir feed hose, straight down to get that hose clamp and to get it moved away. You are going to have to break that glue that we talked about on the new hose. We have a little bit of what I can only assume is hot glue. You're going to want to remove that. Push that clamp out of the way. Okay, I went ahead and pulled off that clamp that I was talking about down there that goes to that little side hose, this one, and this wire connector. And then you see this little eyelet right here? This little eyelet, we have another tree clip retaining a wire, and that's the wire that plugs into that sensor. But nonetheless, you have that. I'll show you what that looks like on camera here, so you can get a better idea of what you're getting into. So that little connector down there plugs in right there, and the tree clip is right above it. Now, I wanted to show you one thing, maybe pretty critical to how this all works out, but I'll show you. I've got my trim clip removal tool, and right here, man, focusing this is not fun. So that little clip is that clip. I'll just switch this over to manual focus so I can show you this accurately. So that little clip right there is the one we want to get some sort of a screwdriver or trim panel removal tool, whatever you got. It's kind of flat, pokey, to put it in there. And then these connectors are usually pretty tight, but yeah. So from here, silicone lubricant, patience, and wiggling, and get that loose and off. And then at that point, the hose should be free to come up because we're off the radiator. The sensor is disconnected, the sensor wire clip is disconnected, the secondary little outlet hose is off and disconnected. So in theory now we should be ready to pull off that main clip, take it out of the vehicle. Alright, now got that off here. When you grab that hose, be mindful of what's going on with that clip. I like to clip it back in as I grab it. I'm trying to think of these things so that I tell you about them, but we're going to kind of pull it off to the side towards the belt and the fan clutch and get it directed up in that way. It is going to get caught on literally everything because you still have that sweet little spring clamp with those nice sharp edges, but essentially we're just going to twist it up out of here. If I was using two hands, it would be out of here by now. But nice little passageway for this thing to go up around the fan, and out she comes. There's our lower hose. So if that's all you're doing, essentially what you're going to do is clean the flange where you pulled that clip off of. You're going to clean that, and then you can put in your new hose. And what happens is these things have a little O-ring in here. See if we can get this on camera here. Right where my finger is, there's actually a little O-ring. So if you pull yours off or look at the new one, you can feel that. And it should be pretty soft. You should be able to squish it with your finger, but they get hard and they leak, or they get worn, or in this case, this particular hose, it's actually leaking where the hose connects with the connector body. On a lot of, say, BMWs and so forth, this connector actually becomes so brittle it breaks. So definitely use the right coolant type. And yeah. Anyways, now that that's off, if you're going to just do the lower hose, I'll go ahead and insert a timestamp here for when you should fast forward to watch the reassembly for the lower hose. Otherwise, if you are going to do the thermostat, then stick around. Let's do that. More tips and tricks here. So if you squeeze these connectors just right, what happens is they lock in the open position for these hose clamps. So this one is locked open, this one is locked open. This applies to the larger hoses, but the smaller hoses, the lock tab is usually gone. They're kind of a single-use deal. So you'll squeeze that one, slide it down, unlock this one. This one is still staying on the hose nicely. This one did not. If you do have to move these out of your way, do yourself a favor and use a tool to do so. I mean, these things are just absolute finger traps, so grab a pair of pliers or something, move it out of your way. If that thing snaps closed on your finger, it does not feel good. And then we do have one wire clip right where the tip of my pliers are going here. So one wire clip right there that we're going to use our little trim tool to pop that tree clip harness deal off. And then we can just pull these hoses, and then we're going to have one, I believe it's a Torx 30, again right at the end of my pliers there. And back here again. And now we're going to look at this right here. Getting real sick of this autofocus that's just not working right now. So right here we have another wire clip on the edge of this thermostat. So again, it's the same wire and all that, but we do need to pull that off. We're going to slide that trim removal tool right behind that and pop it out. And I went ahead and pulled that T30. So now this is completely free here. So this being completely free means that now you can essentially just pull it off. It's not quite that simple with this. You are going to need a little bit of a pry tool, like right here. I did twist the hoses to break the surface tension on the rubber, and then I'm only really using this pry tool so that I can show you. But yeah. Alright, so we got the old part out. Looking down in here, that's where the thermostat would sit. And with that thermostat gone, you now have access to the front pulley of the power steering pump. But that being said, we do have that part out. Take a look at the part. This is the new part. This is a thermostat housing assembly. Normally this guy sits in there something like that. So we have the one bolt hole over here that's going to hold that T30, which is securing it to the cylinder head of the vehicle. We have our cylinder head side hose, and then we have this hose here, which, you know, this hose connects to the radiator, and then I believe directly to the cylinder head, if not just to the crossover pipe. And then this hose here, which again goes into the valley of the motor. Down here would be our lower radiator hose connection, and then up here we have that other accessory hose. None of those details matter too much as far as where they go, just more so where they're connected to in our case of replacing this. So now that we have that part out, we're ready to go. This is a good chance to take a look behind these hoses here. There are some cam sensor behind, or cam actuators behind those hoses that can leak oil, so you may want to take a look and make sure you don't have a leak. You want to replace an O-ring while you're here. But if all looks well and you're not doing anything with these other hoses, then we're going to go ahead and put this new part in. And again, this part just drops in front of these hoses. I find it easiest to connect. Hold on one second here. I'm going to turn off our autofocus so I can get us right in focus where I want us. So, drop the new part in, and then I find it easiest to connect this left hose first. So, I want to kind of push that up into its place here. You notice that spring clamp just fell down on me here. So like I said earlier, you're going to move these around. Grab yourself a pair of pliers or some other tool to move that. They don't feel very good when they bite you. So now that we have that left side hose in, kind of massage what would essentially be the upper radiator hose to thermostat hose into place. This little wire connector clip here is going to need to be in its place. So you can clip that in now or later, it's kind of up to you. I'm just going to do it now because I'm thinking about it, talking about it. Okay, trying to do that left-handed is not working out too well. But then we have that little T30 screw that sits down in there. That's okay. You want to make sure that these radiator hoses are all the way on their correct position. They kind of run into a little tab that sticks out right there. So you do want to make sure that those do go all the way down and run into that tab. Let's talk for a minute about these spring clamps. When they're in their correct position here and you want to unlock them, that can be kind of a pain in the butt. So how do you go about unlocking these things? Well, best way I found, well, didn't really show that on video very well, you grab the gated tab, which is the larger tab, grab it and pull it. Once you have grabbed and pulled that, it will release. Then you can grab your hose pliers here and just move it up into the right position. Okay, so now that we have both spring clamps in their correct position, you want to feel around the spring clamp and make sure that there is rubber sticking out past the front. You don't want the spring clamps to be so far down that the clamp is directly parallel with the hose. That's because when the clamp compresses on the hose, it actually squishes the material that sticks out. It sticks that material and squeezes it out. Because the act of squeezing this, it's not actually just compressing. Rubber is not very compressible, but what does happen is that material is being dispersed. So it's actually, rather than squishing down in the sense of like a mattress, what are those, memory foam mattress? It's not like a memory foam mattress where it squeezes and no material is displaced. There's no air that has to be displaced here. When you squeeze the hose itself is displacing the material outwardly. And what that does around the clamp is that you're applying a pressure, which is squeezing that area that the clamp is making contact with, and it's spreading the material outwardly around it, effectively creating almost a imitation O-ring in the amount of pressure and the shape that the inside of this hose will take form in. So it's important to have a little bit of stick out on either side of the clamp so that little stick out can occur. Also, if you're at the edge of the hose here, when you go to displace the material, because you're clamping the edge, all the force will be applied rearwardly of the clamp and very little will be applied at the front. And I'm sure there's a material scientist out there that may be watching this that might just throw a fit over what I'm saying here, but in layman's terms, that's what's happening. You want that hose to not be all the way down at the end, the clamp to be at the end of the hose, because if the clamp is at the end of the hose, then the hose could very easily come off when compared to having a slight bit of stick out. And you can see here we have a slight bit of stick out. There should be somewhat of an indication of where that was on the old hose clamp, so bear that in mind when you are looking at this. You should be able to somewhat see what's going on. Okay, so we have our clamps on. I even brought up this little lower hose here and put the clamp on that, and then we have the wire, which is clipped here, again clipped in the middle underneath this junction of this accessory hose, and the body housing itself clipped in those two places. Now we're ready to put the new lower hose in. I'll grab that now. And so this new lower hose, if you forgot, we're gonna drop this down like so. We're gonna feed it this end in first, kind of turn around the fan shroud there, and we're gonna be working in pretty tight quarters down there. So we're gonna feed this down and around, and we're gonna be working around this part of the clamp that's sticking off. You can choose now, if you'd like, to take that spring clamp retainer off. It might make your day a little easier in feeding it through, but it will make it harder in putting the hose on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that on. I'm going to feed this down around the fan in between this hose and the bottom of the thermostat. Once I get that part through, I can drop this down. Now we're seeing it here at the front of the, or at the rear of the radiator end cap. And our assembly is now somewhat wedged between the radiator fan and the thermostat hoses. So we're going to keep pushing that down. And we just want to see that hose go all the way down as far as it can. And keeping an eye on getting caught on things. Like right now I'm getting caught on that temperature sensor wire, so I'm going to feel for that. Get that out of the way. And just keep shoving that hose down. And then once you think you're about in the right position here, this hose is pretty close. There's the hose that goes to the bottom of the thermostat housing. This one right here. So this hose is actually right now, it's pressing up against the lower radiator hose that I'm putting in. And we do also have to come over a little ways before we're in our correct position. So shove it down further so we get past it. And as we try to line this up, we'll kind of get an idea of what's going on here. I'm gonna grab a little more light so maybe you can see what's going on. Okay, so we'll go to a little more light and see if that helps at all. You can see what's going on here. So with the hose shoved down here, behind, like I was talking about, and then we're getting up close to the thermostat housing. So should be able to line up with that thermostat housing pretty easily, which it does, which means we're not in the way of anything. And I found the easiest way to do this, try to do this on camera here, is get the bottom of this hose on the radiator. Okay, it's not on all the way, but it is on. And then this lines right up. So, two ways to put these clamps on with the spring clip and the O-ring. You can either try to shove it up past, just like that, or we can again pop that spring clip loose, pull the hose up, and then reattach that spring clip, and then just assure that everything's where it should be. Okay, so I got that connected there. We can grab our little sensor wire here, and we want to tuck that sensor wire here between those two hoses. This might not seem important, but it is. Once you have those two tucked in between, you connect the little tree clip wire connector down there, and I reach in here with this connector facing like so, and connect that to the sensor. Boom, locked in, not going anywhere. So that's on there, the hose is set. Then we just gotta attach that hose, that little round that you see there. Gotta attach that back onto the lower radiator hose and push the lower radiator hose all the way back on the radiator and set the clamp. Real quick, I thought I'd talk about the lower clamp on the new hose, how it has the spring retainer here and how you get that off. I found the best way is grab it with your long pliers like so and kind of twist and pull. I believe there's more official methods. I think you can actually slide this guy off. And if you're looking at it like so, you could slide it off of the clamp in either direction. If you try to pull straight up, it pretty much doesn't work, so you have to kind of just twist, which compresses the clamp a little bit, and then eventually it slips out and you're able to just pull this off. But now all the clamps on the thermostat are tight. The magical T30 screw back there is tight. The lower clamps are on and tight. The lower accessory hose on the lower radiator hose is on and tight. Everything's on and tight. And the sensor's plugged in and clipped in all the right places. And our lower clamp's on all the way and tight. So now that that's all done, this is a great opportunity to leak and pressure test before we go any further. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to kind of reassemble. Maybe not. Let's do it. So if we want to leak test this way, we got a few ways of doing it. You could fill it up, run it, and see if it leaks. You could do a vacuum fill, which involves using a vacuum bleeder, which I'll use here shortly, to fill this system. Or we can use a pressure tester. So with this pressure tester adapter here, and then the main collet, show you how easy to put this on is. This one here is a Mac Tools variant, but I'm just going to turn that on with the hose, one-handed, twist this, locks into place, it's under pressure. Now we can take our pump and we can just pressurize the system. And there's no coolant in here per se, but pressurizing the system will allow us to see if it holds pressure. I'll find a way to do this one-handed here. It is notable to say that if you have no coolant in the system, this takes a lot longer to pump up than if you have a full cooling system. But for this use case, we're going to pump it up to anywhere from 15 to 20 psi, and then we can check if it holds pressure. Okay, so went ahead and pumped that up off camera to 15 psi approximately. Looks like we're just shy of 15 psi. The official test procedure is you want to let this sit for 1 minute, and during that 1 minute you're allowed 1 psi of drop. The full test would be 10 minutes, and you're allowed something like 1 psi of drop per 2 minutes or something along those lines. I'd have to look up the exact spec, but you are allowed to drop a little bit, but not a lot. And for our purposes here, we're just reference checking that it is holding pressure. We didn't forget a hose or have a substantial leak. Being that the system's just filled with air right now, we can check to see if we're leaking any air anywhere around. Here I actually have a little bit of just dish soap and water combined in here. See if we can get some suds there. There you go. Look at those bubbles. So we're under pressure, and we can spray all the hoses that we worked on and make sure that we're not getting any crazy air bubbles. And it is okay to spray soap and water on just about everything in your engine bay. It's all designed to withstand a pressure washer, so spray it up, make sure that you're not developing any air bubbles, which would be forming now, and they are not, so should be good. I will say, these DIY videos that I'm producing here for y'all, they are not made for DIY at home. Now, I'm saying that because I'm not going out to, say, Home Depot, buying a $100 toolkit and showing you how to do this on a limited budget. What I am doing here is I'm trying to show you guys who are in the field doing this professionally how you can do this job or these jobs with tools that you likely already have or that are easy to acquire, and give you some tips and tricks as to how to best perform this, or just give yourself a fighting edge before you start your next work day. So in the case of this Land Rover LR4 here, we have, you know, some specialty tools that we're doing to do this job. So if you are a DIYer, there are some tools you may want to acquire. This is not to say you can't do this job at home with regular tools, but there are things that will make your job easier or more precise, such as a pressure tester and a vacuum filler. You can acquire pressure testers at your local Harbor Freight store, a kit that'll work fairly well. If you are working in the trades and have a Mac Tools truck, you can get this one here, part number Romeo Alpha 10036. And the Mac Tools pressure tester, they should know based off of that part number which one you need. But like I said, you can get pressure testers for relatively cheap at a big box tool store such as Harbor Freight or just online Amazon. Back to the repair here. Now we need the fan shroud that we took off earlier. So we're going to take this same fan shroud we took off earlier here, and following the same mindset as before, we need to get this out from underneath the hose. I'm going to zoom you out a little bit so you can get a full picture of what's going on here. I'm going to tuck this underneath the hose. I like to do this side first. That way I can move this over. Moving that over allows me plenty of space to then slide that in. Move the whole shroud over. Just kind of lift up on it because there's a little clip on this side and one on the other side. Being sure that this wire here stays out and available so you can clip that into its appropriate place. And then you just want to line these up to their clip locations. So there's one clip here, one clip here, one clip here. And it's really not that sturdy, so don't be freaking out if it's like, man, this thing really doesn't feel like it's on there enough. They're just not that sturdy to begin with. And this same wire harness that we were just talking about clips in on this hole right here. You clipped in there, and you clipped in there. And then this is all in the right place with this little bypassing hose clipped and connected. From here we can grab our intake duct and get that set. Okay, even though we're doing the same thing as before, just in reverse for this intake hose, I thought I'd throw this in here because it is kind of a challenge. So as we're putting this in, essentially we want to kind of go towards, you know, we got the front end of this intake up and we got the rear end of it down towards those posts. And then basically what we're trying to do here is we're going to get this lined up. And we want to get this around the throttle body. So there is a little bit of a persuasion going on here, and you do want to make sure that these are kind of floating around the air filter housings. You can see these are nice and down, this is nice and down, and once you kind of push it down to where that's going to line up, and being sure that this hard PCB line is not getting crushed, you can then kind of massage this guy into place. You've got that throttle body opening, push it on there. Now that PCB hose, it's kind of another story here. it naturally wants to go to the right place. So once you have that PCV hose in the right area and you're sure that it's lined up with the barb there, kind of just got to grab this thing push it on until it clips. Kind of wiggle it, make sure that both sides are clipped, and we're on. And that connects to the rear of this valve cover here. So if you do manage to break that, that's that hose. It's not very fun. Both intake boots to their respective filter housings. Get this pushed on all the way. Double check and make sure that your throttle body connection's on there good. And then you can just grab your 7mm again and just do the opposite of what you did to take it apart. Sometimes these clamps are kind of more stiff when you tighten them than when you put them together, but it's alright. And again, I'm doing this all one-handed, so your mileage may vary. I do like these 360 swivel head ratchets. At least these ones from Snap-on. I don't have experience with any others, but I tried one of these one day from Snap-on, and now I have both the 1/4 and the 3/8 version because they're quite handy. I like to turn them straight up and use them like sort of a screwdriver or a ratcheting screwdriver if space is tight. And then, yeah, it gives me a lot of options. Part number of this guy is Tango Hotel November Foxtrot 72. That's that. The ratcheting Snap-on wrench. Kind of last but not least here we have the cooling system refiller. This one is from Mac Tools. Charlie Sierra Romeo 302. And we want to get this guy out. This one is the universal fit where it has a large cone or it has a step cone. These are going to be for your small radiators like the Honda, Toyota, Subaru type of deal. And you got the large cones. And just going to grab that guy, stick it in the reservoir, take your hoses and stretch them out. We have a feed hose. This is going to go in our bucket of coolant, or a gallon jug I should say. And then we have our air hose. This is going to be where we're going to basically be exhausting too while we create a Venturi vacuum. So I like to kind of just shove that way in out of the way here. Get your pressure tester set where you want it. Close all the valves. Okay. Connect a main air line. Ooh. This is shop air, 90 psi regulated. Let's see if I can just set this down. There we go. It's kind of a two-handed operation there, so I'm gonna get that connected. Now the trick I found with these is the universal ones at least is kind of push down on the gauge, open the main line. Audio is going to be lost here in a second mostly, but I'm going to open the main line, then I'm going to open the second valve. So I got 1, 2, 3, air in, suction, and feed. So air in, suction, With that coming down, we actually have a leak. So this is what I was talking about, another good leak testing tool here. So when you have this thing going, it should rise pretty quick, and it wasn't rising very quick. And now it's dropping because there's a leak. So get that back going here. Question is, where's the leak? So now we can apply this suction and spray with soap and listen. Where we spray the spot where it is leaking, the sound will change. So I'm going to work on that now. Alright, so here's one of the things we're finding. We've got a borescope in here underneath the intake manifold. And what we're looking at in this image here, this is the oil cooler. And see, we do have coolant puddled up around the oil cooler. We're still holding pressure. We're just not holding vacuum. So it's likely a slow leak. Trying to navigate this to where we can see a little more. Alright. Not really any bubbles forming around it either. But I can't really get my spray, my soap spray, quite as deep as I would like. And there's not a lot of room, even with a real tiny borescope like this. Come over here to the other side. And that's the Fidos into the valley, and no giant bubbles around there, but once we get down here, it's really hard to see. Nothing fresh, all that soap's from me, and I'm not seeing any big collections of bubbles. Yeah, small bubbles, that's pretty normal. That right there is collected on the side of the pipe, that little plastic pipe that comes off. It's not a huge deal. I've been watching these bubbles for a little while now, and they're getting slightly bigger, but I don't know if it's enough to cause a problem. So I would say that we'd probably want to do a cooler on this, so I'll talk to the customer and see if we can get it approved. If you need yourself a big fancy borescope like this, Snap-on sells this one. That's a BK7000. They're kind of expensive. I think it's like $1,800, but it's got a very, very small camera included. This is shooting in HD. I think it's 720p resolution, but it's quite a bit higher than a lot of standard borescopes. And then this guy's small enough to fit through glow plug holes. It can fit down a rifle barrel and so forth if you're into that. You can record videos, take pictures. You can send this over Wi-Fi or connect via Bluetooth to your phone. And there's a lot of cool things it can do, but for the main purpose of what we're doing here, yeah, oil cooler. Let's see if the customer wants to do it. What's up? Fast forward here a couple days. So I got approval from the customer to go ahead and take a deeper look at this and see where that leak's coming from. I did actually go ahead and I'll turn this light on. I went and pulled this main port here on this top of this hard pipe, and I was able to put coolant and pressure in there, and I was able to see a pretty significant leak coming from the valley down underneath the throttle body and eventually down the motor. So we know we have a leak in the valley. We verified that every way we can, and now it's time to do something about it. So I've got the approval, so now I'm going to give you a rundown of what we're going to do from here as far as how we're going to take this apart and what we're going to be looking for along the way. So first step that we're going to do on this is we're going to take off both of these noise insulators. These actually just clip into place. So on this side we have this PCV pipe looking deal here that we have to take off out of the way. We are going to end up disconnecting this. And then we have the isolator itself, which actually just clips in on these little ball clips. And there's several of them. But so, kind of massage your way in there, pop these guys off, and then take note of where they are located as you pop them off, because you are going to need to put this back on. And then, same thing over here. We have the oil cap that will need to come off. I'm going to loosen that for a moment. Come back here to this pipe. And I'm going to get that out of the way. And use this video to kind of notate where some of this stuff goes, because it is a little confusing. One thing I try to be mindful of here is get this out of the way here and try not to knock a bunch of crap into the motor. This one is a little easier. It's kind of a pain, but it's a little easier to shove this side one-handed than it is with the other. So it kind of gets caught up here. That's a purge valve. Gets caught up here a little bit around the purge valve, but not so much so that you can't get it out. And you don't want to force this stuff, but you also need to come out. Okay, coming back to the motor here. This is one step where we are going to want to disconnect the battery. So underneath the passenger side of the vehicle, passenger side of the engine bay, we have this cover. We're going to go ahead and pop this guy off. Goes up and out like that. And then we're going to need a 10 mil to get over on this side. Pull that battery cable off. And with these negative battery cables on the Land Rovers at least, you can pull this off and kind of tuck it down behind the battery so it doesn't make contact again. So, go to 10 mil. Disconnect your battery. I'm going to get it loose. I'm going to come over to that cable, twist and pull up. Once you have it up like this, you're probably like, man, what do I do now? It's just going to spring back into its place. Well, that's where we actually go in and we're just going to shove it right behind the battery. Now, it's not just going to come back up and touch that post. We're disconnected. We're good to go. And the reason we kind of do that is we need to come up here and pull this fuel line. So this is a connecting fuel line that goes from the pump side of the motor, which is what houses the fuel pumps, or fuel pump I believe on the 5-liter non-supercharged. But we've got one hardline connection over here, and then we also have one hardline connection over here. We do need to take those off. There's a risk of fuel spray and stuff, so again, use only for professionals should you really be doing this. That's my disclaimer. If you choose to do it by yourself, don't go putting your hands somewhere you wouldn't put anything else. Now, one thing I will say is that obviously we're going to have to pull this pipe off of here and off the back of the valve cover, but in order to do so, this line's in the way, so pull ahead and pull the line off first. We're also going to disconnect the throttle body and take the bolts off and let it hang. That's just so we don't have to break the sealed connections for the coolant bypass, essentially the warming plate of the throttle body. So we'll just leave the throttle body here and pull the intake out. So we got fuel line, we have this PCV or CCV system hose, throttle body gets left behind, and then back there those two screws, which again T30, that's going to be for the harness that clips onto the back of the valve cover. We're going to leave that there. And then we have, I think this thing only has 10 screws that hold the actual intake manifold down. So do that. And so we've got this T30 here. Now, for these fuel lines, we have a 17 mil wrench, and I like to use the longest one you can to break them loose because they do spray. I already cracked these ones, not thinking about it off camera, so go ahead and crack those guys loose, and then you just want to, well, slowly wrench them off. I find it's best. There's usually one side that wants to come off and one side that doesn't, so I'll get one side off so the whole line can move. And we have a kind of a large mass of fuel now that's moving out of here. Let's see if we can get this on camera. But down here, we have a fair amount of fuel coming out. So again, be mindful, we don't want to have any accidents or fires or nothing like that. So take your wrench, get this guy loosened and off of here. This particular thread feels a little damaged to me. I shouldn't have to use the wrench once it's loose. So I'm not sure what happened, but I think at some point this thing may have been kind of forced into place. Could be wrong about that. Maybe there's some corrosion under here or something else I haven't thought of. But for whatever reason, I'm having to use the wrench the whole way. It's off now. Cool. I'll back you out here. So we're going to take this line, and right now we're kind of trapped. We have this hose that we've already worked with. I'm going to lift up on that. I'm going to slide it out underneath the wire harness on this side, and then back out on this way. Technically this can only go on one way, but if you are worried you might get it mixed up, just flip it upside down and put it up on the wiper cowl. Now, do note that this was just full of fuel, so you could leak fuel. You don't want to mess up your car. Now, moving on to kind of the next step, if you will, here. This particular CCV hose, the one that goes to the intake feed, is not going to be in the way, but the one on this side will be. So we're going to disconnect that, squeeze the two sides of this connector and disconnect that at the front, and then we're also bring you around over here so you can see. We're also going to disconnect at the rear, and over at the rear here we have this line comes in and it actually meshes in at the back there at a 90. So that's where that's connecting in. It's up to you if you want to flip this out of the way or pull it off. I did disconnect this hose because it is 100% in the way. I think I'm just going to flip this up so I don't have to fight it later. And then now we can get those two T30s that we were talking about earlier. So to get these T30s here off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a real stubby Torx bit. You don't need that stubby one for this, but I would say the shorter the better. And put that in here and loosen those up. So again, most fasteners for the most part that are well designed and not American made, like Ford and Chevrolet and Dodge and things like that. Most of these European fasteners you're typically going to loosen, and then they come out the rest of the way by hand, no problem. So just get your wrench in there, Sometimes you get a stubborn one like this one here. So hold it into the socket head, get it loose, get it out. So this harness back here, I'm going to loosen that so it's not in the way. See, that's got to be out of the way so that the intake can come up. This hose here is going to have to come up behind that. And then we can go around to all these fasteners on the side. And when I say these ones, I'm talking about, say, this one here, 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 and then more over here. And then we got the same thing on the other side. I want to get those off. Now, before I do that, I need to address kind of the elephant in the room, which is the throttle body, its screws, that wire connector going to the map sensor, and maybe a couple other small things. But for the most part, that's all we have going on here. Okay, what's up guys? Had to do a little fast forward here, but so we did get this awesome oil cooler out of that, and what we're going to do is take out these T30 screws that surround the perimeter, the circumference of the perimeter of the oil cooler. That's all these guys here. And so you can take those screws out, and then we're actually going to move the cooler rearward, and that's going to take this coupler here, which slides into the water pump down underneath this black little crossover pipe, and it's kind of a fun thing fishing that out of there. But that goes into the water pump, and then the cooler slides into this. When you take this off, coolant will try to escape this rear port here. There's a small channel here that's going to allow that to slowly go into the valley as opposed to leak over into the oil, but you should plan on changing the oil either way. Anyhow, the coolant's going to try to go in and fill up the valley. I take a small, I have a extractor vacuum, one of these guys. That's going to be a good lifesaver for you. It's going to allow you to extract that coolant as it fills up in the valley. And once you've got that sorted out, oh, and before I forget, we did take this coolant hose off here, the lower one on the thermostat housing. So take that off, and we're allowed to get the oil cooler out. Take that little plastic fitting out, and now we're going to put the plastic connector fitting into the water pump with new O-rings. If you do buy these parts from Land Rover, you're going to need the connector fitting, a second O-ring, because the connector fittings only come with one O-ring, so you need a second O-ring that goes on the oil cooler, which I'll show you that. So on the oil cooler itself, you have this connector fitting. That's what goes into that plastic fitting, and you see that's the old O-ring. So we're going to replace that O-ring, and we're going to replace the connector. Then we have the oil cooler itself, which I couldn't see anything wrong with this. The gasket, if you look here, it looks like that gasket was on its way, especially this here is the port for the coolant. That thing was hanging on by a thread from leaking, so it's a good thing we're doing this. That being said, now we can do the fun process of taking the cooler. We got all the gasket surfaces clean here, get the cooler clean, put our new gasket on, put the new branch fitting into the water pump. Don't forget to do that, that'd be a bad day. Then we can slide the cooler into that with our new O-rings, get her tightened back down. I didn't show either, but the knock sensor harnesses, all of these sensors, there's 4 of them. You want to take that harness off. We already undid the other 2 connectors in a prior video, or a prior clip to this. And we can just leave that on the cooler, pull it out, and then we can put it back in, and we aren't all mixed up as far as where the connectors go. So I'm gonna put this back together, and then we can check our work. Okay, so we got our coolers on. I went and torqued down the bolts here. In this case, I have our 1/4 inch torque wrench. That was the easiest for my use. And I torqued that to 13 Newton meters, which is 115 inch-pounds. That's for you American folks like me. From here, we'll reconnect our sensors, our knock sensors, all 4 of those. And then we're just going to get the intake manifold back on. Technically, at this point, we could test the cooling system, do that leak test again. So maybe we'll do that just to show, kind of double checking our work before we move forward. Since we didn't pull the throttle body off, we left it dangling, so we left those coolant lines connected. We could check the cooling system right now, so let's do that. Alright, popping back here for a minute. So, okay, so back here at the intake manifold now, you see we have our intake with this vacuum hose, which when we pulled it off, we really should have left it on the intake. And so that connects here and here. And so we can connect those, run that up over the top, and leave that right here where it should be. Leave it well enough alone. And then we can set that in and reconnect that fitting. And then so the only thing we're going to have to worry about is plugging in this one little wire connector right here. So I'm going to put that in, connect that wire connector, and go from there. Boom, so we're back together. We got our intake on. Things are looking good. We got our throttle body tightened down. We got our connectors plugged back in. We have our vacuum lines connected. But one big piece we absolutely cannot forget, and we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves either with, is this guy right here. So this fuel line, actually, it's important to remember to put this in at the right time, because if you put it in too late, you're going to have to take some stuff back apart to redo this. So, yep, just like we did when we were taking it off, we're going to put this side in first, then we'll put that side in, and we can line up our nuts. We're going to leave these bolts alone until you've got these fuel lines started. I'm going to start this off with the nut that was giving me a hard time. Get that one going, and then I'll get this one going. That way we know that we're... Yeah, see, that one's okay. So I'll start a couple threads on there. I'm not going to tighten it down, but just get it to where it's loose, but it's on there. I'm going to take this side here, and the threads were kind of jacked up the whole way out on this, so it's really hard to say what's going on. If you can see there, everything's lined up, but yeah, those threads are just not doing great, so I'll work on that, come back to you, and should have it all together. So normally when you're pulling a vacuum, you're going to pull the vacuum down pretty much as low as it'll go, and then you're going to shut off your vacuum line, and then you're going to grab your suction line, and this is going to run down into your coolant bottle. From here we're going to let that drain. It's going to take more than one bottle here, so I'm going to sit here and babysit this fill valve. And then, as soon as we see an air bubble come up from the bottle here, we're going to shut the fill valve and we're going to switch. So I heard it. There's your bubbles coming out. So I shut that off. I'm going to grab our next bottle. And we'll poke a hole in that. There's still going to be some left over in this container, so don't freak out. It's just not all the way down to the bottom. I'm going to switch that, and we're going to start draining from another full one. So what we're doing here is we're replacing a vacuum we created in the cooling system with coolant rather than air. So this is using the Venturi effect to pull vacuum. It's going to pull the air with the Venturi effect out of the system through this vacuum hose, and this is just venting, and then we're replacing it with our fresh coolant. So because our source is on the ground and our vehicle's up here, it's going to struggle to get those last couple inches of mercury vacuum. See right there, it reached its limit. So then we can take our vacuum line, open that up. That's going to let the system equalize. Then we can close that and close our fill valve again. We're going to add air. And here we're going to check our fill level. We're going to kind of slowly see how it's coming up to the top. That's it. So we'll just see if we can draw in any more. That should be it. This is a pretty complete fill. We're still going to run it up to operating temperature and bleed it, but this is kind of the preferred method for most cooling systems, is to just use this system. We'll open this valve to drain our feed line back into our source. I'm going to open this check valve port here, and our cooling system is full. So now we would again do our leak check with the pressure tester, but it does hold vacuum, so if it holds vacuum, it's going to hold pressure 9 times out of 10. So yeah, now we can hook our battery back up, test fire, and make sure we're all ready to roll. Alright everybody, I hope you enjoyed this video and it was helpful to you. If you have any further things you'd like to see done on LR4s or other vehicles in general, recommend them in the comments. I'm more than happy to keep an eye out for those vehicles and try to make those specific videos. But in this case, we have a successful completion of this repair. Our cooling system is maintaining fill. We don't have any leaks. It's always important when you crack these fuel systems to, after the fact, grab your flashlight and go get eyes on everything you worked on. So get your flashlight out, go take a look. Take a special care to notate on things like your high pressure fuel lines, that they are not spraying high pressure fuel while the vehicle is running. Obviously you want to check your leaks. Once you're satisfied with that and you're able to clean up from your repair, then you can go ahead and put your lower skid panel back on the vehicle. That way you are ready to deliver to the customer and or yourself. Maybe this is a DIY project for you. Does this bother you? Do you want me to put the gimbal on for every video? Do you like the handheld action, up close and personal, moving around, looking at the vehicles, having kind of a person-to-person with me when I talk to you? Is that something you like? Or should we be doing more handhelds so we can not have any horizontal tilt? For me, in my videos, I do appreciate having this kind of felt motion, this nice, well-rounded approach. I'm not so fond of the dead steady look that a gimbal gives in this type of a setting. I think it has its place. I think when we're taking shots of, say, like a nice smooth shot of that nice sweet Land Rover logo, or we're just introducing a car, having that nice smooth motion. See, but I've been shooting video for a long time, and that's all handheld. That's not with a gimbal. So Is the benefit there? I don't know. That's up to your discretion. There are micro shakes from my hand that are not present on a gimbal, so let me know what you think in the future in the comments. I appreciate having this handheld motion. It feels more personable. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.